live, those logged in via social media, and listeners via the airwaves. I'm Davia Chambers. Welcome to the official press conference hosted by the Chief Secretary of the Tobago House of Assembly, Honorable Farley Chavez Augustine. I'll now invite Honorable Chief Secretary Augustine to address you.
Pleasant afternoon, members of the media, fellow Tobagonians, citizens watching at home and abroad. Thank you for being with us and for looking on over the past 2 days as we install a new Tobago House of Assembly, a new executive we did today, and we prepare to transform Tobago. The purpose of this press briefing is to go through with you, members of the media and the public, the assignment of secretaries, how I will assign them according to division. As I indicated yesterday, the law requires that the president swear or appoint rather, upon my advice, secretaries and assistant secretaries. Once that is done, it is then my duty to assign them to divisions. And I have made some changes in terms of divisions because there is a desire to streamline our divisions in what I believe is a much more appropriate manner. And so I will go through with you division by division, and I will indicate the name of the secretary and assistant secretary assigned to the respective division. Subsequent to that, I will ensure that we send to you, members of the media. I believe I still have your WhatsApp contacts. I have not lost it as yet. So I will subsequently just send you it in writing. That might be easier for you to manage. But before I do that, I just want to make the point that we felt as if there was an urgent need to rearrange some stuff. I know Mr. Charles started some of this realignment, and I believe I am continuing what he started, and that I am bringing it to a much more logical sort of reasoning. And again, it speaks to one of my pledges that my duty is not to abandon everything that happened before, but there are some things that require some continuity. So the first division, I will indicate you and of course pay attention to some of the name changes or the slight adjustment in the names. Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection. Health, Wellness and Social Protection. The secretary will be Dr. Faith B. Israel, as you can well imagine, and she will be ably assisted as Assistant Secretary, Brother or Mr. Sonny Craig. Then we have the Division of Settlements, Public Utilities and Rural Development. That's Settlements, Public Utilities and Rural Development. We have as a Secretary, Ian Pollard, and as the Assistant Secretary, Mr. Niall George. Then we have the Division of Food Security, Natural Resources, the Environment and Sustainable Development. Let me say that again. Division of Food Security, Natural Resources, the Environment and Sustainable Development. And you will notice that we are realigning the environment portfolio with the division that we know formally as agriculture. And when we talk natural resources, we are talking fisheries, forestry, and we are including energy. So the energy portfolio that was a part of education will fall under natural resources. This portfolio will be managed by Secretary Natisha Charles Pantin, and Assistant Secretary Nigel Tate. Then we have the Division of Education, Research and Technology. And when we say technology, we are talking about spearheading the digitization of the Tobago House of Assembly and moving the THA almost speedily to an e-governance model. In fact, we desire to lead the nation in this regard. So the Division of Education, Research and Technology, we have a Secretary, Ms. Zorisha Hackett, and Assistant Secretary, Mr. Orlando Kerr. The Division of Infrastructure, Quarries and Urban Development. Infrastructure, Quarries and Urban Development. We have Secretary Trevor James, Assistant Secretary, Mr. Joel Sampson. Next, we have the Division of Tourism, Culture, Antiquities and Transportation. And yes, I added an additional name to the title. So it's the Division of Tourism, Culture, Antiquities and Transportation. We have as Secretary Tashia Boris and the Assistant Secretary, Miss Megan Morrison. Then we have the Division of Community Development, Youth Development and Sport. We have as Secretary Terence Baines and Assistant Secretary Wayne Clark. The Division of Finance, Trade and the Economy. Finance, Trade and the Economy. I will be taking that portfolio. Additionally, there will be an Assistant Secretary in the Office of the Chief Secretary, and that Assistant Secretary will be Mrs. Sertica Williams-Orr, and Mrs. Williams-Orr will focus primarily on public administration, planning and labor. Public administration, planning and labor. And let me indicate almost immediately to alert the fears of any public servant that we will once again move one of the administrators back to the Office of the Chief Secretary. So notwithstanding the merging of community development with youth development and sport, it will not result in a demotion of any administrator. And I needed to say that almost immediately, given that we just came out of a campaign where I was accused of wanting to slash the throats of public servants and workers. Now, let me give you some justification for the alignments that I have made. In the first instance, in the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, you will recognize that we removed the title Family Development, and that's because I want us to get broader than just family development. And so the concept of social protection goes beyond just treating with the family as it is and being as specific to the family, but being broader than that, treating with gender-based issues and practically any social issue you can think of. I also will indicate here now that we will be seeking to streamline most of our social welfare support through this division. So I can assure you that pretty soon the Division of Finance will not be the ones to distribute food cards, but it will come out of this singular department. It may require us moving the staff that was treating with this matter at finance across to health. We will not be firing any staff to achieve it, but we will consolidate our resources so that we can give adequate social protection to those who need it. And when needs be, if there's a need to hire more social workers to get the job done, we will do that. Then the Division of Settlements, Public Utilities and Rural Development. And you will notice that for the first time we are adding to one of our divisions, specifically the concept of rural development. We made a pledge during the campaign that we are going to look closely at how we improve on our rural areas on the island. More than that, I am aware, painfully so, that we have had a rural development committee where we paid people handsomely, but we have not really seen the impact of that. And so I want a division in a very measured manner to settle down and to look at rural development. And of course, this comes along with the usual public utilities and the settlements. The division of food security, natural resources, the environment, and sustainable development. Now, this is a big one. And for me, personally, this is one of the most important divisions that we will have. Tobago's primary asset is really based on the environment, is really based on the natural resources that we have had. I don't think we have done sufficient work when it comes to energy, and we will need to do that now, including looking at alternative energy. We have to look at how we can improve on our deliverables in fisheries and forestry and ensuring that these departments are adequately staffed. I am aware that these departments in many ways are very short in terms of the labor force to get this sort of monitoring and evaluation done. And notice I did not just say agriculture, but I said food security, because I want to be very clear what our objective is. Our objective is to achieve food security for the island of Tobago. Then I go to the division of education, research, and technology. And as I indicated, you can't run a successful government without there being adequate research being done. We used to have a thing called PRDI, Policy Research and Development Institute, started by former Chief Secretary Mr. Charles. In fact, it was set up by Dr. Vanos on Mr. Charles's behalf in that THA that occurred between 1996 and 2001. We look forward to rebuilding that and creating for Tobago our own equivalent of the CSO, the Central Statistical Office, so that we will be grounded in research with regards to all the actions that we will take. We also include in that portfolio technology, because when we're talking technology, we are talking digitization. Our goal is to lead the country with e-governance. Our goal is that very soon Tobagonians will not have to get up and leave their homes to walk into an office just to get basic services done. Our goal is that our accounting will be properly digitized so that we can avoid the pitfalls that the Auditor General has time and time again highlighted for us. And also in this portfolio, they will be looking particularly at the establishment of tertiary level education. So education here is not just primary and secondary, but it includes tertiary level education. You would note that the former Tutor Tobago president is the assistant secretary here. And I've said to them in no uncertain terms that they better fix the issues with all them teachers who need the increments, the upgrades, who on contract, who outstanding gratuity. They have to find a way to fix it. They have to find a way to find the money and find a way to fix it. It's long outstanding and it has to be fixed. It has to be remedied. And so I believe we have a strong team here. Both individuals were educators. Both individuals taught at secondary school. One of the individuals was even involved in a lawsuit against the THA, and one concerning gratuities and remunerations and the type of contracts teachers were given. And so I expect the both individuals to fix these issues. We then have the division of infrastructure, quarries, and urban development. This is pretty standard and run-of-the-mill. except that I've attached the portfolio of urban development, you'll be aware that Mr. James led our charge for the redevelopment of Scarborough and creating an efficient city of Scarborough. But outside of Scarborough, we'll be looking at some other areas like Plymouth and Roxborough for accelerated urban development. Additionally, the Bonaccord Crown Point area. In fact, when we look at the Bonaccord Crown Point area and we see the kinds of development that has happened there owing to the private sector, and the fact that this development was not planned, isn't planned in a general sense. And then we look at the pitfalls. Every time it rains, it floods. I expect them to plan our urban centers well to avoid these pitfalls. And I expect both Mr. James and Mr. Sampson to bring to bear on the portfolio that additional requirement. Then we have the division of tourism, culture, antiquities, and transportation. Pretty similar to the last time, but I've added the term antiquities there because in recent times I've had an experience whereby I am observing that many Tobagonians are not paying attention to our artifactual heritage. You drive around this island, you see people just planting flowers in coppers that were once used to boil sugar cane juice by slaves to export. We see people just tossing down cannons here, tossing down artifacts there. And I've been to countries, in fact, when I visited Ghana, I could not even leave the airport without the authorities at the airport going through every single item I bought. Although I had no antiques there, no historical artifacts there, every painting, every craft I bought had to be signed off on by someone at the airport. Why? Because that is a country that is insistent that it protects its artifactual heritage. Tobago has to do the same. We have to protect that aspect of our heritage. We traded hands more times than any other Caribbean territory. And so we have available to us here more artifacts per square meter, per square mile than any other territory in the Caribbean. And we have not paid much significant attention to them. And we need to pay attention to them. We need to document them. We need to protect them. We have to look at the view of beefing up our museum and adding to our stock there. But we have as the secretary, Ms. Tashia Boris, whose expertise is in marketing. And we also bring in as assistant secretary who will work more on the side of the culture. And even with the antiquities, Ms. Megan Morrison. And Ms. Morrison called me this morning and she said, DPL, she calls me DPL. She says, DPL, if I want to take that portfolio, I'm telling you one time I'm consulting with Mr. Royal Titus. I said, well, by all means, you should have called him since yesterday. So I expect them to liaise with the anthropologists on the island, bring in the necessary support, and let's look at protecting our heritage and using that as a platform for generating tourist income. Then we have the division of community development, youth development, and sport. And this is strategic on our part because we are convinced that we have to realign this thing we call youth development. So immediately, labor is no longer with community development. The enterprise development aspect, which includes BDU and so on, those are moving back with finance. Again, our principle is we'll just move the staff back. We don't need to fire the staff to get that done. We'll just realign the staffing. But such grant programs must be part of our larger economic program. I don't see why it needs to be in community development. But more than that, I have a serious challenge with Tobago having so many community-related plans that are not used by the community, or that the community has limited access to. Growing up in Speyside, the older community center was by far more usable than the new one that we've had. Because in the old community center, everybody know you just go across by Miss Michelle or somebody and you get the key and you go in. You play table tennis, you lime till however late. There's scouting for talent going on there. All your bazaar, your little lime and your christening, everything there. And now we have community centers that are sterile places, almost inaccessible by our young people. And that has to change. We have also made the point that some of our community plans, we will set up community studios. So our talented young people, those in the arts, for example, the youth men on the block who could voice a tune, who could chant on a rhythm, they will have some access within reason to affordable studio time. And hopefully we could provide for ourselves our own Rihanna right here in Tobago. Additionally, we'll be looking at rearranging how we do work in community development. We also have to pay close attention, keen attention to the fact that we have had far too many conflicts in our communities, far too many conflicts that are left untreated. And this is a notice to all our village councils that you have to prepare yourself, because the THA cannot invest in fixing these community buildings to give it to community institutions who are at war with each other. Please, and let me also say it for the benefit of those who are empowered by a PDP victory, village councils and community institutions are not supposed to be extensions of my party. So you're not doing me or your party any favor if you think you need to barge into a village council and say it's we time now. No, I don't want that whatsoever. We need to fix our community institutions. Please, that goes for village councils, our churches, our sports groups, and we assign youth development and sports to this portfolio because we also want to rearrange, for example, the way we manage our sporting facilities. Our promise to you was that our sporting facilities will be managed by clubs, by sporting clubs. So this is your home ground. We give you the subsidies to maintain your ground, to ensure the goalposts are in good working condition, the field is cut, and then you in turn use those monies to get your equipment for training, your balls, your uniforms, and so on. And so I know Brother Wayne, who has a long history in sport development and youth development, will work well on that end. And Pastor Terence Baines, who has led many community institutions, many social institutions, will have some strength there. And then we have the division of finance, trade, and the economy. We added the element of trade there. Tobago has to earn more money. Now, I don't agree with those who say that all we contribute is $200 million. That is false. That is fake news. We do contribute more, and we contribute significantly more if we are to consider our contributions through hydrocarbons, and if we also have to consider the contributions made through taxes made from monies in Tobago, from economic activity in Tobago that isn't paid in Tobago. So all of your big national companies, including your big banks, they don't pay their Tobago side of the taxes in Tobago. It's not disaggregated. And so it's not fair and it's not truthful to say that all we contribute is $200 million in taxes. But notwithstanding that, Tobago has to begin to ask itself quite pointedly, what else can we sell to the world? What do we have that the world will want to purchase from us and pay big money for? What sort of goods or services do we have that we can sell to the world? And that's some of the direction we want to take finance, trade, and the economy. I've also mentioned that public administration, planning, and labor, Assistant Secretary Sertica Williams Orr will be leading that department under the office of the Chief Secretary. And that's because I made a pledge to workers in Tobago that we will fix the public service issues, the labor issues that we have. I made a pledge I will fix the contract worker issues that we have. And so I brought on someone who was a senior public servant who understands how the public service operates. In fact, she was in HR for a while and she understands it very well. And so I expect her to bring to bear on the portfolio that ability to move us to the place where we can fix the issues in the establishment and provide the kind of leadership that's necessary when it comes to the public service. Now, I have perhaps one other thing I should do. Yesterday at the swearing in, I recognized that the introduction of Mr. Nigel Tate was a one-liner. It simply said that he was born and raised in Patience Hill. And of course, that is admirable. In the campaign, he sold himself and we sold him as a man from Yard. And the people voted for him because he was a man from Yard. But I also felt it was a disservice to him that a lengthier introduction wasn't given that will say to the island what his experiences, life experiences have been, and how that will be brought to bear on the portfolio that he will now hold. So yes, Nigel Tate was born and raised in Signal Hill, Patience Hill, and he attended the Signal Hill Senior Comprehensive School, and that's where he obtained his CXC qualifications. He then went to the Mount St. George Youth Camp, a place that we have to work on getting back. And when we talk about community development, remember I spoke on the campaign about that two-track education system and the THA giving equal credence to the non-traditional academic sort of education. We can't build over Scarborough, we can't fix Tobago and have to import all the skilled labor to do it. We have to begin to retool and retrain our people to do it. So he attended the Mount St. George Youth Camp, and I see one member of the media pumping fists because I know he was once one of the mentors, teachers there, and that's where he obtained his certification in plumbing. Mr. Tate has over 29 years in the security industry. So he worked on the port in what we call port police, as we call that, and that's where he obtained several other certifications, including law enforcement and health and safety. He also has a wealth of knowledge in industrial relations because he is one of the executive members of his union down there at the port. I mean, it was one thing about PDP, we're full of union people. And also, he's a community activist in the field of sports and football. In fact, I have had to compete with him many times with my football team in Speyside against him. And I felt it was absolutely necessary for me to share that bio of him so that Tobagonians know that he is well qualified to represent them at this level. At this juncture, I will take any questions that you may have. If you see me still struggling with my voice, yes, I've had to be treating with my vocal cords. In fact, I was so concerned on Tuesday. That I rushed to a private doctor and said, look, test me one time and tell me if I have COVID or not. Thankfully, I don't have COVID. So I'm very, very happy for that. But of course, I will need to work on the throat a bit more. So yes.
Yesterday, you told us that the first deputy chief secretary.
Yes.
Yesterday, you told us that he was made deputy chief secretary with a plan in mind, and that you will tell us what that plan is. What is that plan?
Thank you very much for that question. I know I forgot something, but ask the next question and I'll address that.
Okay, and you also say that the agriculture division is understaffed. But when you were campaigning, you indicated that there were so many people within the assembly that you needed now to develop the private sector so that the private sector could take some of that employment. Do you plan to hire new staff, or are you looking at realigning staff?
All right, let me take the second question first. So the Tobago House of Assembly is top heavy in terms of the amounts of people that we have. But what you will also find is that some critical areas are short on the expertise and the manpower that they need. One of those areas, I believe, will be in the area of fisheries. Forestry is another one. I marvel at how we are able to protect the rainforest and to protect flora and fauna and indigenous species when we just simply don't have the sufficient staffing to do it. I wish I could stand here and tell you that we had sufficient expert staff to be able to tell you that we have all this research done, and I could just go into one office or go online somewhere and find out what's the density, the population density of some endemic species or so, but I can't. And that's because we just don't have the wherewithal to do that. And so what will happen is a lot of realignment to try to move people to a place where they're not underemployed, but they're employed doing exactly what they were trained to do. Because while we may have some staffing issues across when it comes to natural resources, we have some of the people who are qualified in that area that might be just working as clerks in another area, or working in works or doing something else unrelated to what they have studied. And so it's an opportunity to realign people in a meaningful way. With regards to Mr. Duke, you will notice that this is the very first time in the history of the Tobago House of Assembly that the position of Deputy Chief Secretary is a standalone position. What do I mean by that? Every other time, the Deputy Chief Secretary carried the portfolio of running a division. Now, the THA Act is clear. The executive constitutes Chief Secretary, Deputy Chief Secretary, and not more than 7 other secretaries. And so there is no legal requirement for him to run another division or to run a division. Under the auspices of the Deputy Chief Secretary, I want Mr. Duke to work on the following for me. Number 1, Mr. Duke has to work on us getting that autonomy conversation going constantly until we get it. Number 2, we made a campaign pledge, perhaps since 2017, where we said we will set up in Trinidad something that's akin to a Tobago embassy, the purpose of which will be to market Tobago's products, to provide services to Tobagonians living in Trinidad, and to facilitate investments into Tobago through that office. Mr. Duke will be charged with the responsibility to get that going for us. But Mr. Duke will not be given any other division. I did indicate to you previously, through, not you directly, but through other media engagements, that Mr. Duke needed to satisfy some legal requirements in order to be a member of the executive. And so you will recognize that his union is no longer paying him. Legally, to the letter of the law, that is satisfied. However, I will not want to assign Mr. Duke to a division to run because there will be obvious conflicts of interest that may arise from doing so. Let me give you an example. Imagine a public servant falling out with a Secretary Duke. Who would the public servant go to? Will the public servant go to his or her union, where Mr. Duke is the leader? Or will the public servant go to the executive or the secretary, which will also be Mr. Duke? And so to avoid that conflict, for the very first time in the history of the Tobago House of Assembly, we have a Deputy Chief Secretary that is not running a division of the Tobago House of Assembly. That being said, Mr. Duke is himself working on severing ties with his union. He is working on that. It's not as easy as people think it would be, and he believes that he needs to set up the proper exit plan to allow for continuity within the union, and so that things don't just fall apart because the head leaves. And so he needs to ease himself out of the union, and that he will be able to speak to you more on when he's available. Today, he's not so well, and he decided to not attend because he developed flu-like symptoms overnight. And unlike myself, he has not been tested for COVID. I have been tested, and I have been tested negative, and I am also vaccinated. So he decided to not show up just in case it could be more than what meets the eye. But so when I told you that we should not be presumptuous yesterday, I know most people were thinking, well, let's see what division Mr. Duke will get. Let's see what division Mr. Duke will run. And I know some were, waiting in the corner, hoping, that we could, yes, we'll get a gotcha moment. I have been very clear before that I perceive some conflicts, and we will require Mr. Duke to take this almost titular role, as opposed to being actively engaged in a division of the THA. That way, he still has a seat at the table, but he certainly doesn't have a significant executing role when it comes to the division and the interaction thereby with the workers. And as I indicated, he is working on severing his ties with the union. He just doesn't feel that the best way to do that is to just cut it off immediately, and that there should be a stepped approach to doing so. And of course, we respect that, and we will support his decision to do that. Once he has severed all ties with the union, as the Chief Secretary, I can reconsider whether or not I will give him a role. That will be my call, of course, to make. But for now, he will just be Deputy Chief Secretary, which is a first in the history of the THA. We have had instances where the Chief Secretary did not hold any other portfolio but that of Chief Secretary. But this is the first time a Deputy Chief Secretary will not hold another portfolio except that of Deputy Chief Secretary.
Hi, good afternoon, Clayton Clark. You mentioned, of course, we have a new executive, a new divisions. What is the plan to address work ethics, work culture on the island with all these new changes and the plan for of the new executive?
Now, notice I brought on Mrs. Sertica Williams, and I indicated that she will be placed specifically with public administration, labor, and planning. And the reason for that is so we could address all of those things. I know the outgoing Chief Secretary announced the starting of some academy of sorts for the public service. And that is one of the things that we will continue, because it's something that we advocated for as well. In fact, and I said it on the platform, and I don't know if people believe me then or not, but I said it since on the platform that there are some things that we just will continue, and there's nothing wrong with that. Trinidad and Tobago will do better if successive governments continue the things that are actually good. That will allow for continuity and actual growth and development. And of course, the academy, the training academy for the public service will assist in that regard in terms of treating with our work ethics. And we are going to implement some measures, not just to treat with the work ethics, but to improve on people's sense of pride in the workplace. A lot of our workers have been mistreated over the years. They feel used and abused, and so they don't feel a need to give more of themselves. It's difficult to ask someone who has been on contract for donkey years and getting the gratuity late, and knowing that there are no big retirement money to collect, to somehow always be on time, to work later than the hours allotted, to give extra, to do more. I want to do two things. I want to demand more from our workers, but I also want to make our workers comfortable and happy. So when I demand more, you can't complain because I've made your working conditions better. And therefore, it puts me in a morally superior position to demand more from you. Mr. Turner?
Yes, thank you. I want to continue on the issue of Watson Duke's portfolio here. You mentioned that he will only function as Deputy Chief Secretary. But is there not still a conflict there, given that, let's say, for instance, you have to travel abroad? He will now have to act as Chief Secretary, performing all the functions of Chief Secretary, including chairing executive councils, taking particular decisions that may still create a conflict of interest?
Certainly. Very good question. And I assure you that by the time I make my first travel abroad, Mr. Duke would have severed all his ties with the union. What if I get sick? Unlikely, but the executive is also not one individual. The executive constitutes Chief Secretary, Deputy Chief Secretary, and 7 other members. So, and it's not an autocracy. It's not what the leader of the executive says that goes. It's what the executive team says that goes. And I can tell you, we have an extremely strong executive council. I don't have an executive council of yes men and yes women. So you are even protected even from my own whims and fancies, because I have a very strong and critical thinking executive council, and that will no doubt taper any possible eventualities that you may want to cite. But I don't foresee any significant challenge with him holding, in a very titular sense, the position of Deputy Chief Secretary.
As it pertains to the issue of food security, we're going in that direction now. Is there a set timeline by which you would like to see us achieve food security? Is it at the end of 4 years? How soon are we looking at?
Definitely, that's one of the goals that we wish to achieve by the end of the first 4 years in office. Notice I said first 4 years in office. And the reason why I stated that in the name as opposed to just saying agriculture is because I don't want us to just get into farming or to just give lands to farmers or to just rear small ruminants. So I want us to be focused on how do we achieve food security. For many, many things, Tobago does not have the economies of scale to, in a very advantageous way, compete when it comes to agricultural products. But we can compete when it comes to some agro-processed products. I've made the point time and time again that we are missing a lot of income because we're not doing the value add to these products, and that we have a situation on this island where people are just, mind your goats, you sell them just as they are. You plant on the farm, you reap, and you go on the side of the highway, you try to get all sold for you. This division will also look actively at how do we move these products to the end users. And the end user is not just the 55,000 or so residents on the island of Tobago, but those residents in Trinidad, the over 1 million residents in Trinidad as well. And so this division is going to move post-haste into treating with the matter of food security for the island. If there's a disaster in Trinidad, there will be a disaster in Tobago. If for some reason both or the plane cannot move because there's a massive earthquake, then we'll have challenges. Look at what was happening when the ferry system was down. Look at how many complaints we got. Look at how the distribution sector almost collapsed. We have to do better. We just simply have to do better. And the boats that come up here loaded have to start going down to Trinidad loaded as well. We can't even begin to talk about selling produce outside of Trinidad and Tobago when we wouldn't even send 2 tambourine ball to Trinidad. We just have to do better. And this is one of the divisions that we expect to put in a lot more work.
It's interesting that you mentioned the ferry, because my next question has to do with issues such as that. You mentioned on the campaign trail that you'll be looking to essentially take charge of all the areas that fall under the fifth schedule of Act 40 of 1996. Is there a roadmap for getting that done, or is that still a work in progress?
Well, the roadmap for getting that done is not completed. To complete that roadmap, we will need the advice of eminently qualified legal minds. Because what has also happened, and most Tobagonians do not realize, is that we have the THA Act 40 of 1996, but we also have a situation where there were several other pieces of legislations that needed to be amended and that were never amended. And based on Act 40 of 1996, cabinet dominance supersedes anything else. And because several other pieces of legislation were never amended to facilitate the full gamut of the law in regards to Act 40 of 1996, we still have a situation where areas under the purview of the THA are still managed by ministries in Trinidad. That can be remedied with MOUs and with mutual agreements between both sides, so we'll have to explore those. But we will need this sort of legal directions to be able to get that done properly.
And my final question, is there a role that you have in mind for Dr. Finance James? I noticed he wasn't brought in to the executive. Do you have a specific role in mind for him looking ahead to the budget in January?
I can tell you Dr. James made it very clear to me on several occasions that he has no interest in being in the executive. He doesn't want to be in the executive and the day-to-day running of the politics. In fact, what he indicated that he will want to do is that he will come on board in a very advisory position to assist us. And so, yes, he's still here. I spoke to him up to yesterday morning before coming to the house. He gave some advice on some things. I took some of the advice. I didn't take some of the advice, but he's very much present, and we conversate almost daily. So it's something that we're going to continue to work on.
Good morning, George Leacock, Radio Tambourine. Congratulations, Chief Secretary.
Thank you.
I also want to thank you for taking the time to correct the issue with Mr. Tate. Being his director at Youth Camp, I was upset. But there are a number of other people who are upset, and I don't know that there's anything that you can do to correct it. The coverage of the inauguration, the events yesterday and today, was something that we very much look forward to by the Tobago community. Apparently, we don't have a change of administration very often. It's a 20-year cycle. And unlike other recent inaugurations, of course, there were new people coming in. The quality of feed provided by whoever provided it was significantly below broadcast quality. In fact, looking at one of the television clips last night, there was actually the words coming off over the television screen saying, "waiting on video." This morning's coverage, besides the fact that it didn't come with directions to the media to use, it was so bad that we in fact terminated it after the first few secretaries were signed in. I don't know that you can go back in time. The initial excitement is already lost, but I suspect somebody should look into it to ensure that that does not happen again. It is not the way it is done. The media should not be asked to take a feed from the same feed that is being presented to the general public, and maybe what might need to be done is a edited version properly presented so that people can look at it and put it in its historical context. And now for my questions. A number of things you've said will rotate around the question of finance. And you did say in an interview prior to being sworn in, that would have been on Tuesday, that you have been told that in some divisions of the Assembly, it seems, and on the development budget, more than the allocation to the Assembly for the year appears to have been expended over the last 3 months. You did talk about having a budget. A budget usually takes up several pages of paper, but doesn't necessarily mean money. Are you now in a position to approach the government to get an advance on next year's money? I really don't know what I'm even asking you to a degree, because I don't know that a situation like that has occurred in the past and what possible solutions could happen with that. One newspaper described it as a bed of thorns. It could stymie all of the wonderful things that you're talking about, and probably needs, at least could we hear your initial assessment?
Well, to take the first commentary, I have not seen the footage because I was here and part of it, and I didn't get a chance to look on television or anything. But let me apologize to the public that regrettably the feed and the quality of it was substandard and that it was poor. We are in 2021, and I am here talking about digitization, or the irony of that, and Tobago leading the country in that regard, and we couldn't get it right in terms of the quality of feed. I'm not sure what accounted for it. It could have been poor internet service. It could have been many other factors. It's an issue I have been mourned for a while in Tobago, that the frequency with which our public utilities just fail is unbelievable, and I think the Telecommunications Authority has not done its job when it comes to Tobago and ensuring that the service providers provide quality service. And I'm not saying that was the reason for it, but I know many of our students have challenges when it comes to online schooling because of access. That aside, Ms. Taylor, as a new presiding officer, one of the things that she will have to look at is how do we build out the infrastructure of this place. It is evident that what we have here is not prepared for 15 seats, is not adequate for a much more autonomous Tobago, is not adequate to having the kind of committee meetings and hearings we want. We have well outlived this space, and we have not done much work to increase it. I know we have next door where CAST was as a potential place to do an annex, and we will have to get to that post haste because we have to prepare for our parliament, our seats of parliament, the Tobago House of Assembly, adequate and suitable conditions for the broadcasting of all of our events. If we talk in democracy, people have to be able to participate, and participating is hindered when what you're looking at is as bad or worse than what I saw growing up on my grandparents' old black and white Zenith television. We just have to do better. And so I apologize on behalf of the staff and those who were in charge. I will find out what caused it, and I will ensure it doesn't repeat itself for the future events of the THA. With regards to our finances, I have not been there as yet. On Monday, every single one of our secretaries and assistant secretaries will make their first visit to their respective divisions, and so administrators can take this as the notice. I had a conversation with the chief administrator this morning, Mrs. Koroma, and so I know they are expecting us. The first step for me in finance, trade, and the economy will be to do an assessment of what we've had, what we have spent, what we have wasted. And yes, that budget in January will not be a 20 or 30 page budget. It will be a lean, streamlined budget, based on what we have, what we need to get, and how we should move forward. I can assure you, if our monies were wasted, I mean, we're just in January, and the financial year ends in September. If our monies have already been expended, I will no doubt go back to Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Imbert, and to request additional sums. And I'll be sure to tell them that it was their own people in Tobago, their own brothers and sisters, who spent it out and wasted it out, and now we don't have any for the people of Tobago. I'll be sure to remind them of that. And I'm certain the politics of that will prompt their hand and make them even more generous to the people of Tobago. But I will no doubt be very clear and honest with Tobagonians. I'll be very open. I believe in the kind of openness where we just put everything outside there. So you will know quite openly who did what, who spent what was wasted where, which contractors got what, who got paid how much money for work that was way below the value for which they were paid. Trust me, I will lay it all out to the public. There's no real reason to keep it secret. And of course, if that has placed us in a crazy position when it comes to being able to fund the rest of the fiscal year, then we will have to ask. And I believe the Minister of Finance will be kind enough, given that it would have been his own brothers and sisters that did the damage.
Good afternoon again, Clayton Clark. When is your first Executive Council meeting carded for? Second question, you mentioned conflict resolution. Are you in a position to give an update on the Castara fishing fiasco that's going on now? And my third question, the Tobago Business Chamber is calling for the review of the Tobago, hope I get this right, the Foreign Investment Act. I may not have addressed it properly, but comments around that particular act. Thank you.
I thank you. First Exec Council will be on Wednesday. Exec Council meetings are on Wednesdays, and it will be no different. It will be no different next week. We get to business immediately. We may have 1 week out though. It won't be next week, perhaps the following week, because I am making arrangements for a very detailed kind of retreat and training program for members of the executive and the team at large. You would appreciate that this is the very first time, I guess, since 1980, that the entire executive is new to being a member of the executive. I have not a single member of my team that was on an executive previously. So nobody is coming with old political cultures to bring to bear on our new executive. However, the pitfall of that is that we will naturally have individuals who will need to be brought up to speed with the day-to-day management of divisions and what the rules and responsibilities will be, what the expectations from their respective workers and administrators will be, and how to understand really quickly the financial arrangements that are necessary and the role the secretaries play in that and not play in that, so that we can avoid the things that Auditor Generals have been flagging for a while. And Mr. Clark, you raised an issue with what's happening in Castara at the moment, where we have two opposing fractions from among the fisher folk in the area. And that's very common, not even Castara alone, all around the island, Bacchanal in all the social institutions. And that results in tardying the delivery of community development projects. And of course, using Castara as an example, who do we turn over the new fishing depot to? They can't agree among themselves as to who should lead and how they should lead. So who should we turn it over to? And one of the reasons why I talk about having mediation available to these community institutions is so that we could work out these challenges. We assume that because we're talking about big people, adults, that somehow they will be able to work things out effortlessly for themselves. That is not easily done. And so there's a need for the state to assist these social institutions in achieving the kind of cohesion that is necessary.
Lessons.
Now, before we get to the Foreign Investment Act, before we get to that, and that's something I advocated for as part of the autonomy arrangement, because I've been very clear that nobody in Trinidad should be deciding who foreigners should be able to buy land where. That should be done right here in Tobago by us ourselves. But before we could get to that place, I think the business community is in way more trouble than the Foreign Investment Act. They're in way more trouble. Our business sector is almost dead. We have to find some resources to bail out some aspects of our business sector. When I look around, I see the potential for cheap fire sales to happen all across Tobago, because our businesses, they can't qualify for loans in the bank to service their business. They're not getting sufficient grant funding, and they're just there, unable to reopen. And many might be tempted to just sell off their properties and sell off their businesses. And the result of that will be far less indigenous Tobago businesses in the Tobago space. That, for me, is the priority. That, for me, is what we need to address almost immediately. And that will require that I meet with the business chamber as soon as possible, as well as other key secretaries like those in tourism, because we absolutely have to find a way to protect Tobago businesses. And let me give you one example. I was told the story of one Tobago business that went to a commercial bank seeking a loan of $20 million to do some work. And as you open eye, $20 million isn't a lot for the kind of work that size of establishment will need. They got somewhat of a pre-approval and so on from the branch in Tobago, and they think everything will be fine. They have a good collateral. The property itself could stand as the collateral. It's prime location. If anything goes haywire with the loan, the bank will have no issues selling off the property to retrieve their money. By the time this loan went to the higher-ups, the loan was turned down completely. By the following day, the owners of this establishment received a phone call with somebody offering to buy their property for around the same amount they were trying to get for the loan. Now, that to me tells me that if the THA does not act with some measure of urgency, we will lose a significant number of our indigenous businesses. I don't need to read and spell for Tobagonians. We are bright people. We are intelligent people. And I know all Tobagonians listening to this briefing live will understand exactly what I'm getting at without me having to say it. And that's why there's an urgent need for urgent intervention from the THA. I don't know where we're finding the money from yet. I don't know what resources are available yet, but we will have to get creative, and we will have to find it somehow to secure and protect indigenous Tobago businesses. They are at the mercy of all that's happening. And we can't begin to talk tourism, and the airport is still on lockdown mode. Limited flights from Trinidad, zero international flights. Zero international flights. We can't talk tourism, and one of the most important assets for almost any tourism plant on this island is the beach, and that is still closed. And of course, you could realize that when we see on this side we want to reopen the beach, the other side say you could only reopen when the Prime Minister says so. So you could understand where that will go and how the arguments will go across the pond. But the point is, our businesses are in trouble, and before we even attack the issue of who should be in charge of of the foreign investment or land investment issue, we have more pressing issues to treat with regards to the business sector in Tobago.
Chief Secretary Augustine, as we are on the point of urgent intervention and pressing issues, the COVID-19 situation in Tobago is escalating. I know you all have just been sworn in. However, what emergency plan or plan of action you all have in place to address the situation at the hospital and in Tobago on a whole? That's my first question. My second question is with regards to, you mentioned about the staffing situation within the THA. We have heard instances of persons who have went through the entire recruitment process, been shortlisted, been interviewed, and they are yet to start working within the THA. What plans do you, because of some issue, whether it be HR issue, sometimes their documents are lost, they haven't started working, but they went through the entire process. They were successful in the interview as well. Have you all heard of instances of these, and what do you have planned to address situations like these?
Well, we have heard several stories like those. Several stories of people who applied, got interviewed, and the person who passed the interview, won the interview, didn't get the job. Sometimes you won the interview and you think you'll get started, and 2 years pass and you never get a call. So we have heard several stories like that, and that's one of the reasons why I brought on Mrs. Sutika Williams, because I am putting her specifically to treat with public administration, labor issues, and planning. Specifically, that's what she's going to do out of the Office of the Chief Secretary, because we have to fix those issues. There has to also be a much more fair and transparent process when it comes to making hirings within the THA. All of that will be tied to our goal for digitization, because I kid you not, if you could go online and follow the steps of every interview, every hiring, every contract to be given, a lot of the madness that happens will not happen, because people will be afraid that perhaps somebody will look online and see glaringly the evidence of either corruption or nepotism or just tardiness or lackadaisical attitude popping up. And so the idea behind digitization as well is to create stronger monitoring and evaluation for the THA. And so it is something that I look forward to addressing and fixing. I will also say, if you experienced something like that, feel free to send a note to the Office of the Chief Secretary. Send me a note or message of some kind. And while talking about note or messages, let me say to Tobagonians a hearty thank you for all the well wishes. I have been inundated with calls. In fact, the morning after the victory, I did several interviews between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. And in that period, I got hundreds of missed calls, hundreds. Now, naturally, I cannot possibly even keep up or able to return all the calls. I have not been able to keep up with all the WhatsApp messages, all the Facebook messages, all the Instagram messages. I am behind on keeping up with all of them. It's literally a whole lot. Now, I know maybe 5 months from now, all of that goodwill and love might start to fade away. It comes with the office. But I want all of you, if you have sent a message, you call and did not get me, you left a voice message, you left a voice note, you sent a note, even if I have not responded to you as yet, I want to tell you thank you and to tell you that I appreciate your outpouring of love. I appreciate all of it. Yes, Miss Williams?
Yes, Mr. Augustine.
I was wondering if I wasn't going to get you at all.
Okay, thank you so much. Congratulations, Mr.
You're
Augustine, on the win. We have a question here from persons speaking about mental health for Tobago in terms of the pandemic and the rising rates of attempted suicides. And there's also a question of the COVID-19 pandemic, and a number of Tobagonians are still waiting their relief. There's also persons I'm aware of who are still in need of their rents being paid. Several of them were turned down. Many of them were thrown out of their homes. And many have contacted us at TV6 asking for help. And there is so much we can do. I don't know if you can look into that.
And I'm glad you asked about mental health, because it's something we don't discuss very often. I am on record as being the only one in the last 5 years to have carried a motion to the House to treat with mental health. And when I did so, it was because I saw it as being very serious. I have been on record in that motion and elsewhere saying that we have to get to the place where our community health centers provide a lot more immediate mental health kind of care. And you're right. People are not seeing that there is a psychological impact from all of this, from the loss of income, the loss of jobs, the deaths in people's families, the fact that you're on lockdown and you can't have access to human interaction. All of these things are taking a toll on people. Currently, in mental health, they are significantly below where they need to be in terms of resources, including human resource, to treat with the issue. We have a situation where the one ambulance that was assigned to mental health, sometimes it has technical difficulties. It can't go up certain hills. They have 2 persons assigned to the ambulance, one as a driver, one as an attendant. And all of this I'm telling you because I brought a motion to the house. That's how I found it out. And if one of them take vacation, it means that only one person is available to go and pick up a mental health patient. The field officers, the district officers have very large districts to maintain. And so there's no way we could get sufficient and efficient mental health operations on the island if we don't put the necessary resources in place, the human resource as well as the capital resource. We have to stop seeing mental health as just belonging to people who are crazy, and that everybody with mental health issues is because somebody obey them or the demon possess. We need to stop seeing mental health as that. There are people with real issues, but there are societies in the world where people experience mental health issues and they're not walking up and down the street and stripping naked. And that's because their society takes care of them and their society recognizes that they are ill and they need to be treated and they need to be taken care of. So the first thing I want us to begin to do is to change and remove the stereotypes associated with mental health and mental illnesses. We need to remove that. And once we remove that, it means that those who are in need of assistance will actually come forward and get the assistance. We have to stop thinking that counseling is only for those who crazy, and that people with traumatic experiences, which includes losing your job, that it's okay to desire some mental health treatments. And that's and that is okay. That is acceptable. And you should not be ostracized for that. But we have to strip away all the stereotypes we associate with mental illness. And if by chance anybody's looking at this and you are experiencing what Miss Williams described, I want to tell you that you are not alone. You are not alone. Because, let's be honest, if I had lost my job on December the 6th, I might have been the same place you're at. It's not easy to be employed, gainfully employed. You thought that everything was working out for your advantage. You have higher purchase from courts. You're owing Island Finance. You were getting by because you had a steady stream of income, and your steady stream of income was servicing your debts. And boom, out of nowhere, your second job, which was helping to service the debts, or your main job, is no longer there. Courts is calling annoyingly, and they call very often, right? I could tell you, they call very often. You miss one day and they call. They're calling repeatedly. You're explaining you have no job, you can't pay. They're telling you they will come and repossess the goods. You know the goods are needed because it might be the bed that the children are sleeping on. It might be the tablet that the children are using for school that you took on hire purchase. And you are literally experiencing the possibility of losing it all. Recently, during the campaign, I encountered a young lady, I thought, who has a young child with Turner syndrome. And because of the pandemic, she had to lose her job because now she was required to work on a shift system that did not facilitate her taking care of the baby, and she just was not earning enough to get the baby into daycare. And she was in a position where she just back at home with the baby, no job. The child has some challenges with Turner syndrome. What should she do? And so, yes, some of the experiences I just detailed might sound funny, but they are real issues that people are facing. And I want you to know that you are not alone. Others are sharing in your trauma, and that collectively we'll have to work with each other. I wish to urge neighbors and family members and friends, please don't get annoyed because you have a relative or a neighbor that is constantly asking for help. Chances are, if they were never begging you before the pandemic and they're doing now, is because they have really not positioned to help themselves. We have to help each other without making each other feel bad for requesting such a help. And please, with all the help you give, you don't have to always post that help online, because that also has to help people with their mental health issues. I am an area rep, but I have not posted half of the tablets or the hampers or the food stuff or the bills I've paid during the last 10 months. I have not, because I recognize that part of securing the mental well-being of individuals who are experiencing such trauma is not putting them in an embarrassing situation. And so that's another thing that we have to be very mindful of as we try to protect each other. But yes, it's of serious concern to us. We have to beef up our mental health support. And notice I'm talking about a lot of beefing up in some areas, which means, again, we have to realign people, which will assist with treating with the underemployment issue that we do have on the island.
Questions I have for you. Someone is worrying or wondering about the plan for the quarry, the plan for Studley Park. And one other question with respect to Mr. Duke. Is there a timeline as to him being phased out of the Public Services Association as president?
Yes, so the timeline for Mr. Duke is 3 months, and that's why I could have confidently answered members of the media to indicate to you that I won't be traveling before he leaves the PSA, because I know that there is a dedicated timeline, right? And the likelihood of me being unavoidably absent is significantly reduced because there is a short timeline. But again, he will be the one to discuss this more with you. And until that happens, unfortunately, I will not be bestowing any additional responsibilities on him. And what was the question before that? The quarry, right? The quarry, or what is now called SPEL, because it's a special purpose company. You know, number one, the tradition in every democracy is that when there is a change of government, even if the change of government is from the same party to others within the same party, almost naturally, people who are on state boards and in state companies, they tend to offer their resignation as a gesture of goodwill to the incoming administration. And that goes for the fact that even if PNM had won the election, that too would have been required. That's just a standard thing across democracies anywhere in the world. But with regards to the quarry specifically, one of the things we have to look at carefully is how do we ensure that the quarry earns us more money. In fact, the quarry is like a gold mine to us because of the high quality of material that we can get from it. And I don't believe that we are nearly close to tapping out the real potential out of that quarry. And so we look at ways to even improve on that. I know there have been rumors swirling around of the quarry being privatized and all of those things, not by PDP. And of course, we will have to check to see what sort of legal arrangements have been made with the quarry on behalf of the THA prior to us coming into office. But you would appreciate that we have only today installed the secretaries. So there's no way to really know what's happening there until we get into the divisions and start getting these progress reports. The first thing we'll get from our administrators, and in my case, the chief administrator, will be a progress report, a status report, to show both the financial status of the division and the administrative status of the division. And that will guide the way we go forward. And let me take this opportunity to also say that I am holding true on my promise that the people that we will hire to do these works for us and to be part of some of these state companies and so on will not just be PDP supporters. Once you are talented, once you are qualified, then we will consider you, because the kind of Tobago I want to build out has to be different from the one we have had. I desire a different political culture for us in Tobago. I just want the talent wherever the talent may be found, so that we can have the best people to produce the best results for us. That's the kind of Tobago we have to get. That's the direction we have to go in.
Mr. Augustine, I think it slipped you in terms of my question with regard to the COVID-19 situation.
All right. Yes. Thank you very much.
No problem.
I can tell you that even before Dr. Faith was duly installed today, Dr. Faith has already set up her meetings. In fact, she already started meeting with several of the key players and having communication with them, so that she can be brought up to speed on what the expectations are and where we're at. So she is on top of it. You can expect in this coming week, at the press conference that will be held, that she will take the lead in discussing where we are with our COVID-19 response. The truth is, we have not been doing very well in Tobago. In fact, the doctor I went by on Tuesday, he works in A&E, and while testing me, he said to me, he said, Farley, 1 in every 2 patients we see at A&E test positive for COVID. 1 in every 2. That's a 50% margin. That is staggering. No, I can't just use that statistic to say that's the direction the entire island is going in. And that's what the numbers are for the entire island. But I shudder to think, what if that is the case? You know? And so it's something that we have to get on top of almost immediately. And I can tell you, Dr. Faith began working on that even before she got the instruments of appointments today. And I gave her the authority to do so, because it's something that I needed her to just start running with, without any honeymoon phase whatsoever.
Good afternoon, Chief.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 questions. My first question is in relation to the promise made by Mr. Duke on the campaign trail about the ex gratia payment before Christmas. Now, this is something that many Tobagonians are looking forward to, so can you give us an update on that, please? And my second question, it is in relation to the airport expansion at Crown Point and all those homeowners or landowners who would have been displaced. Do you all plan to continue the conversation with central government to see how best those persons can be assisted as soon as possible, please?
Thank you very much. Ex gratia payment. And let me be clear, I'm glad Tobagonians understood what Mr. Duke meant by ex gratia payment, because there are different types of ex gratia payments. You can get ex gratia payments as severance benefits. You can get ex gratia payments as bonuses. You can get ex gratia payments if it is your employer feels as though you were wronged in the place of employment and there's need to, soften you up a bit. And yes, what Mr. Duke was talking to is the issue of providing some bonuses to people. The former Chief Secretary listed out for us and indicated that that's about 20,000 workers, and he said that will cost us about $20 million. I will be going into the Division of Finance on Monday, and so I'll be going to look to see what we have. And I said to the people of Tobago that while our goal and our intention is not just Mr. Duke's, but our goal and our intention is to give that to all of our workers, we have to look and see what we have. And whatever we have, we will share it. Whatever we have. Our first exec council meeting is on Wednesday. And so whatever we have and is available to us, we will share it. Because the Tobago we know of is a Tobago where we share things. And I've said it on the platform that what was proposed by Mr. Duke is in no way strange when it comes to how governments operate within the region. I think I cited what Antigua and Barbuda that did it for about 3 Christmas straight. They actually doubled the salaries of their workers for about 3 Christmases straight. Certainly, we will not be able to afford doubling anybody's salaries. But I assure you that will be one of the first things that we will have on our agenda come Wednesday at exec council meeting, or first exec council meeting. The second issue raised with the issue of the people in Crown Point, I am one of those that bemoaned the treatment of the residents in that area, and the fact that the residents in that area have, in my mind, been bad treated, have not gotten value for their land. Some got their monies waiting on the access to the lands in Cove and elsewhere, still waiting, and they're spending out that money on rent as we speak. And so I will be liaising with the area reps for that area, that is Mr. Sampson, and of course part of his area might be shared with Mr. Clark, because that boundary now goes all the way down into Canaan on that side of the road. And we will look at very soon trying to meet with these residents and to see how best the THA can come in and help alleviate the crisis that is there. Even if it is for the THA to increase whatever incentives we're giving them for the move, we will try to facilitate their move and make it even easier and worth their while. I can't promise you that we will come in and pay more money on top of what the central government has paid them, but there are other things that the THA can do, including treating with the issue of the lands that they were to purchase back from the THA, either at Cove or Shervan. We can possibly consider whether we will need to waive that or reduce the cost so that they get more money for their move and their rebuilding efforts. So that's something that we're looking favorably at, and that will get our concern as soon as possible. Right, I think that was the final question. I just have one announcement to make to the public. Yes, by now it's a well-known fact that I'm getting married on Sunday. Please, I love you all, Tobago, and I have been telling all of you that I love you, but there's absolutely no way I could accommodate the whole of Tobago there. In fact, I can't even accommodate all of my friends and family. In fact, my family alone number in the thousands, because my grandfather had 27 children on my mother's side alone. So if I am to bring all my family members, that will tell you how much it will be. And I'm just saying to say that we will have a stream for those who cannot attend in person, but I will love for that day to remain as intimate as possible. I know some people tell me, if you could tell me where I want, I still come in. And yes, I can't control your foot and your hands and your car and so on, but I will urge you to also be safe, because I do not want my wedding to become a super spreader event, right? I don't want it at all. I also don't want it to become a spectacle. Marriage for me is something that is sacred, and that must be treated with the kind of sacredness that it deserves. Please, so it's not a concert, it's not a show, I am not any celebrity, right? I am Jay-Z and Beyonce, or any one of those celebrities that the whole world wants to see and know. I'm just ordinary Farley getting married to the woman that he loves. Just that. So I thank you for all your well wishes. I thank you for celebrating with me my nuptials to come. And unfortunately, we can't have the traditional big bash that we are accustomed to in the countryside. But certainly, when we are through this and over this, maybe we will be able to give thanks together as one community, one family, and so on. Was that? Yes, I can give you all access to the stream. That's not a problem. I can give you all access to the stream. Right? What's that? And unfortunately, no honeymoon. You see, I've already given the commitment that I will be traveling over the next few months. And guess what? Once the Chief Secretary is within the country, he is not on vacation. You only consider to be on vacation when you're out of the country. So don't worry, we'll be fine. We will survive it. We will find the time over the Christmas holiday weekend and so on. We'll find the time to be together and so on, and make all the babies and so on that will be necessary, right? So thank you all very much. Have a good weekend, everyone, and remember, we out to our divisions bright and early on Monday morning. Thank you, and we look forward to working with all of you.
So on that note, that's how we'll end this press conference. Let me thank the Chief Secretary of the Tobago House of Assembly, Honorable Farley Augustine, for his address. Thank you, members of the media, for your presence and questions. And thank you, our viewers and listeners, for joining the live broadcast. Do enjoy the remainder of your afternoon, and please remember to stay safe.